Hi, I'm Andrew Fleming. I'm a reporter of the Vancouver Courier, and I'm sitting here today with my esteemed colleague Cheryl Rossi. Cheryl's one of the people who contributed in our latest neighborhood special feature, which I mentioned before. We did the Kensington Cedar Cottage neighborhood, and one of the latest additions to the Kensington Cedar Cottage neighborhood, I mean, it's been there for a few years, but it's the new complex at the corner of Knight and Kingsway, where they have the new King Edward Village and the home of the new Vancouver Library, where they have some rather some rather interesting sculptures outside that Cheryl looked into. What can you tell us about, Cheryl?
Well, they were actually installed in 2008, but I spoke to the head librarian there, and she said there was so much reaction in the beginning, they begged the city to come up with an information sheet that she could hand out. And 5 years later, every time she prints them off and puts them out, they're gone again. So people remain interested in these sculptures.
If you haven't been yourself, they really are unusual. I mean, you've got this. You go outside of the Kensington branch of the library, and there's these life-size bronze sculptures. We'll have some photos go along with this, but you've got a life-size jaguar with a little goat seeming to nibble on its ear. You've got a giant python that's wrapped around a pig. You've got a little boy hanging out with a bear. What are some of the reactions people have to these?
Well, I spoke to someone who, and this was only minorly mentioned in the story, but I spoke to someone who used to live in the condos in the tower, and she said the first time she opened her window and saw this vulture there, that she was horrified, and that she used to foster dogs, and the dogs would run towards the window and then pause, scared because of this vulture. But she and her husband were interested enough to Google the artwork and saw that it had been written up in a French art magazine. So, she said in the end, maybe like they were kind of creepy, but it interested them enough to pursue more information, and it brings interest to a rather bland development.
Sure. Now, the exhibit is called Peaceable Kingdom. It's by an artist named Tom Dean. And again, the idea behind it is showing how these animals can coexist in nature. We're all kind of Elton John's circle of life. Everybody's coexisting and all the rest, but they look rather terrifying. It looks like the pig is being crushed to death by a python rather than snuggling her, I guess, is whatever he's...
Yeah, but I think if you just pass by and glance at it, you might think that. But if you stop and look a bit closer, then you see the looks on their faces, and they don't necessarily, that one in particular doesn't look that negative. So that's what the librarian was saying, is that people come in kind of freaking out about the sculptures, and then when she explains it, they take a second look and it changes their perception.
And it is part of the, my understanding is when there's new condo developments okayed by City Hall in Vancouver, there has to be a certain component put aside to kind of give back to the community. So if, I believe it's the Aquilini family built this latest development, if they're given permission to put up some huge money-making condo, they have to at least give something back for the community to enjoy. And in this case, it's this art development, which, love it or hate it, it's a bit more interesting than a lot of the kind of more, a fountain or something bland like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, also the librarian said, at first she said, maybe some people in the area should have been consulted more. The library used to be across the street, and she had no idea what was going in. The first day she got there, she saw these rats outside the new library, and she said, oh my God, they followed me from across the street, with the disruption of the construction, and not realizing she was speaking to the artist. But, so if it's a large rezoning, then the art has to be supplied. So Yukiko Tosi, the librarian, said in the beginning, maybe it would have been good to have more community input, but maybe it would have been watered down then. Maybe they would have chosen something that was less eye-catching. And really, she said good public art inspires discussion, and this has definitely done that.
All right. Well, look, shifting gears a bit, you did another story this week involving art quite a bit. There's a park called Guelph Park down in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood that's also known as Dude Chilling Park, unofficially known as that, after something we can talk about in a sec. But there's a new art exhibit, or art exchange there where people can come and swap art, that kind of thing. What can you tell us about it?
Sure. Well, Cheryl Cheeks moved from Commercial Drive to the Mount Pleasant area in February, and as she was unpacking, she kind of put aside some of her own photos that she'd taken, some art that she had, and some books that she just wanted to get rid of. And she knew there was a book exchange nearby at 10th and St. George, and so she put the books there, but she also put some of her photos and art there, and went back a few days later and everything was gone. So she thought, maybe I should start an art exchange. Someone told her about the Vancouver Foundation's Neighborhood Small Grants. She applied for that, got the money, got her dad to build this cabinet, made with found materials, and unveiled it in July. So passersby can, she left some art supplies in there and some art to start with, but passersby can kind of unlatch the doors and see what's in there. And you can leave art that you just don't want anymore, something you've created, and you can take something. And when I was there, I saw a 4-year-old climb right up and get right in there, and she had left a few pieces in there. And then I saw Colin Upton, who's a known local cartoonist. He had taken a print from a local illustrator out of there, and then he had his comic books in there, and he actually said one of the stories in a different issue, part of it took place in Dude Chillin or Guelph Park.
For those who aren't aware, perhaps, at Dude Chilling Park, there's a sculpture in there that sort of looks like a guy reclining. And several months ago, an artist came by anonymously, and he replaced the Vancouver Parks Board sign with a sign that says Dude Chilling Park. And it stayed up there for I don't know how long, but I mean, it looked just like a park board sign. It was so realistic that when it was finally noticed and the park board came and removed it, an actual movement kind of sprung up to rename the park Dude Chilling Park. I mean, I believe Google Maps even had...
That's what I was told.
Do you know, I believe Sarah Blythe, the park board commissioner, even tried to formally introduce that. Do you know if there's any traction on that since?
I'm not sure. My sense was it didn't go far, but I'm not sure.
Well, it'll always live on in our hearts, Dude Chilling Park. But back to the art exchange. I mean, I think this is really, really cool. And there's something in my neighborhood, one of the book exchanges as well, and I stop by there all the time with my dog, just dropping off a book, leaving a book. It seems like an art exchange would have the potential just to be free stuff for homeless people to sell on the street, but it doesn't really seem to turn out that way. It does seem to be people sort of honor the spirit of it. Would you agree with that? Is that kind of the sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cheryl often goes and sits on this bench and just watches people. And it seems to be more that people are just interested, like they just want to check it out. But she said she saw an older man walk by once, kind of look at it, walk by again. It was like he was getting up the courage almost to look at it. And the third time he finally looked. So I think, people are just getting into the spirit of it, but it's just an interesting thing to see, and they want to see what other people put in there.
Cool. Well, I'm going to have to stop by this on my way back home. Now, we believe we're going to talk about something else, and I'm drawing a blank here with the pressure of the camera on me.
Oh, we were going to talk about the Trinity United Church taking over Rhizome.
Right, which I guess is just a few blocks away from Guelph Park, Dude Chilling Park. For those who don't know, this is a popular cafe on Broadway Street that I guess is some connection with the Trinity Church, and they are now setting up shop there. What can you tell us about that?
Lisa Moore and Vanetta Lenevet started Rhizome Cafe 7 years ago with a real mission for social justice and to create a sort of living room for people to come together and organize. So all different organizations have been able to rent out the front room to hold meetings there. So it's brewed, like all kinds of things have happened there. The food's pretty low priced, and they had this lentil stew that was pay what you can. So they had this real mission. But it's time for them to move. They want to move to Toronto, be closer to family, and focus on their other social justice projects. And they had announced to the community in April, May that they were closing. And then I talked to the Reverend Beth Ann Thunison, if that's how you say her last name, from Trinity United Church. And she said they just moved around the corner in March. They found themselves, a lot of people in her congregation already go to Rhizome. They were going there after their Sunday services for brunch and saying, oh, someone should really take over this. And then they realized, well, we can take over it.
So I'm a bit confused. So basically, Trinity, they're taking over the operations of the cafe. It's not just going to be a space they use for...
No, they bought the business, not the name, but the business. And they're going to hire a manager to manage it for them because, they don't know about managing a cafe. But they just said their social justice values were really aligned with the owners of Rhizome, and they want to carry on that work. Yeah.
Well, that sounds it seems really interesting. And you think back to the olden days, churches were always building churches. I mean, you have to have a special house of worship, and it seems these days you're finding more and more places operating in just functional spaces. Like, this is a great little cafe. It seems to me, it seems as good a spot as any to have any kind of service, and you can have some soup and that kind of thing. This should be interesting to see how this turns out. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, Lisa and Vanetta were so relieved that this organization's taken over. And I think Trinity United anticipated that people would be fearful that they were sort of going to churchify the space. They said that's not their intention. They are going to hold services Tuesday to Friday nights from 5 to 5:30, but they'll do some, and then they want progressive leaders from other churches to come in and hold services. But Beth Ann had heard from a transgender patron who wanted to be assured that the bathrooms would be left gender neutral, and they will, because it's attracted social justice community, activist community, queer community, and so people are just wondering how it's going to carry on.
So this sounds like it's a much more open-minded church than so many of them, where I can't imagine having a gender-neutral bathroom at many churches, such as the new one on the Center for Performing Arts. Well, look, I think this is really interesting, Cheryl. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy and you're raring to get back to work on your next story, so that's we'll leave it for now. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
I'm Yukiko Tosa, the branch head at the Kensington Library of the Vancouver Public Library. I think good public art is the one that brings a lot of dialogue, and people just don't go and say, oh, that's pretty. But this kind of art is one that really gets people's opinions really in focus. Like, there have been so many comments, pro and con. Some people love it, some people hate it. So it's interesting to see that it produces that kind of dialogue, right? And I think that makes for good art. And it's about animals coexisting with other animals that you normally won't put together. So you've got the pig with the cobra, and it's really not the cobra killing the pig, but it's living together harmoniously. But people don't see it sometimes, so it was really nice to be able to get the artist's vision for what he was trying to create here. And I think once people understood what the vision was, they slowly began to see what it was about, and they were more understanding of the art. The children really love it. The majority of the children I know really like climbing on it, and they like to take pictures with it. But it's sometimes some other people have very strong opinions about it. So that's the way it is. For me, I'm kind of in the neutral. But I really appreciate what Tom Dean was trying to tell and share with the public.
感谢收看今天的大温故事，我们下期再见。